Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us to discuss Medicare coverage of incarcerated beneficiaries. My name is Karen Curtis, and I'm a provider outreach and education specialist here at WPS. Today, I am joined by my friend and teammate, Tom Ryan. Tom is going to be helping me out today by monitoring the chat for questions that you may have, as well as providing some additional information during the presentation. I do have a couple of things to cover before we get started. First, if you haven't downloaded a copy of today's presentation and you would like to, there is still time. A copy can be found on our live events page, which is located within the WPS Training Center. It's in our list of upcoming events. There's a column titled Materials, and this is where you're going to find a link to the PowerPoint material. I will also have Tom add a link into the chat in case you want to get there quickly. Our training center also contains a web page for encore presentations. All of our webinars are recorded, and if there's no technical difficulties, we will put these recordings on our web page. Videos are available for up to 90 days and can be watched on our web page without having to go to YouTube. We know that some of you may not be able to access YouTube from your company computer, and we want you to be able to receive the education that you're interested in. Recordings of our webinars can also be found on our YouTube channel. They will remain until the webinar is redone or if information has changed. Later, there will be a question and answer session if time permits. If you have questions related to today's topic, please send those in using the chat feature. I did receive some pre-submitted questions, which I am going to answer at the time. If there's any questions that I don't get to, or if some require additional research, then an email providing those answers will be sent to everyone in attendance. Our goal is to provide you with an excellent customer experience. We want to know how we're doing. And so later in this presentation, you will be given the opportunity to provide feedback on today's event. This is your chance to let us know what we're doing right. Let us know if you feel there are areas that we can improve. And it also allows you to give us input on what types of education you would like to see in the future. While this is a CMS survey, WPS does look at our results, and we do our best to make the improvements that you ask for. Now, here at WPS, we do our best to provide you with accurate, up-to-date education. Now, if you've worked in Medicare for a while, you know that Medicare rules and regulations can change. So for this reason, the CMS website should be checked for updates, and federal regulations will take priority over anything presented today. Now, we do answer questions based on the facts given, so any changes to that information may change the response given. We also are not able to guarantee payment for services. If you do have a claim-specific question, we do ask that you contact customer service. They do have access to the system, and they can access your claim and provide an answer based on how your claim processed. Lastly, I need to let you know that CMS does prohibit the recording of this webinar. We're recording the event so that it can be posted as an encore presentation. The recording will be available next week if you would like to review it or share any of the material that's being presented today. Now, my goal today is to provide you with a better understanding of when Medicare can be billed for individuals who happen to be incarcerated. To do this, I'm going to discuss some general guidelines. I'll let you know when Medicare can be billed, and we'll take a look at some resources that will help you if you do come across the situation. We're going to start out with some general guidelines. We want to get a basic understanding of some of Medicare's policies so that you know when the rules are going to apply. So first, what does Medicare consider to be a person in custody? You may look at the first two bullets and wonder what's the difference between someone being incarcerated or imprisoned. While these words are often used interchangeably, there is a slight difference. Incarceration is a general term used for someone who is confined to a secure facility. This can apply to individuals awaiting trial or those confined for reasons unrelated to a crime. So being incarcerated does not carry an implication of being guilty of a crime or any wrongdoing. Imprisoned refers to a type of incarceration that is the result of a court-ordered sentence for a crime. It implies that the individual has been found guilty or has pleaded guilty to a crime. It's kind of how all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. So all imprisonment is incarceration, but not all incarceration is imprisonment. Escape from confinement refers to an individual's unlawful departure from custody or confinement. This can be from a jail, prison, or any other form of detention. Prisoners who are on medical furlough or similar arrangement. A medical furlough from prison is a temporary supervised release granted to an inmate for the purpose of receiving medical treatment that is not available within the prison system. This can also be furloughs unrelated to medical treatment. Some common reasons would include family emergencies, preparing for release, appearing in court. This would also include prisoners that are transferred to a different facility. Lastly, we have individuals who are required to live in a mental health facility under penal statute or rule. Involuntary commitment can occur if a person poses a danger to themselves or others, is unable to care for their basic needs due to a mental illness, intellectual disability, or severe dementia. So if a prisoner is getting close to their release date, but they meet the criteria just mentioned, then the court could order them to undergo inpatient mental health treatment. Now, at the beginning of this year, Medicare did make some updates as to who they no longer consider individuals that are going to be in custody. Those released to the community pending trial. So this includes those in pre-trial community supervision. I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but in Nebraska, the pre-trial release program is designed to release non-violent felony offenders under supervision prior to the beginning of their trial. CMS has also removed individuals on bail, parole, probation, or home detention. Lastly, there are times when a prisoner may be required to live in some sort of transitional facility, such as a halfway house. This is often done to provide inmates with a structured, supervised environment that will help them adjust to life outside of prison and reintegrate back into the community. So for these situations, they have now been removed. They are not considered to be in custody as far as the Medicare guidelines go. So now that we have the definition down, let's talk about Medicare's policy. In general, Medicare does not pay for items and services for a patient who is in custody based on regulations set in the Code of Federal Regulations. First, Medicare does not pay for items or services if the individual receiving the services has no legal obligation to pay and no one else associated with the individual has a legal obligation to provide or pay for the item or service. Medicare does not pay for services provided by a federal provider of services or other federal agency. A federal provider of services typically refers to an entity that promotes services and is directly affiliated with a part of the federal government, such as a federal hospital or agency. Generally, these providers are excluded from participating in the Medicare program, but they may be paid for emergency services. Finally, Medicare does not pay for services that are paid for directly or indirectly by a government entity. The U.S. Constitution mandates that prisons provide adequate medical treatment to inmates, Since these facilities are run by state government, the Department of Corrections would bear the financial responsibility for these services. Federally owned prisons would fall under the previous bullet. So far, we've defined who Medicare considers to be in custody. We've discussed the updates that remove certain individuals from the in custody category, and we established Medicare's general rule when it comes to services and items provided to incarcerated persons. But how does Medicare fit into all of this? Let's begin by looking at someone who already had Medicare prior to incarceration. Now, the Social Security Administration plays a huge role in handling enrollment for Medicare Part A and B. They determine eligibility, they process applications, and they manage the initial enrollment periods. They also work with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services to inform individuals about their Medicare options and collect premiums. Now, there are two types of Medicare Part A coverage. There's free and there's premium. In order to qualify for free Part A, you will need to have worked at least 10 years or 40 quarters and paid Medicare taxes while working in the United States. This can also occur if a person or their spouse receives Social Security or railroad retirement benefits. This coverage will continue while an individual is incarcerated, even though Medicare generally will not pay for medical items or services while they serve time. Now, someone who doesn't meet the criteria for free Part A may be able to purchase Part A by paying a monthly premium. Costs can vary depending on how long a person or their spouse worked and paid Medicare taxes. Now, to keep this coverage while incarcerated, someone must continue to pay the Part A premium. Medicare premiums are due monthly, and if not paid, a notice will be sent to the beneficiary asking for payment. If payment is not received within 30 days of that notice, a delinquency notice will be sent. And if the premium is not paid within 30 days of that frequency notice, then coverage will be terminated. Now, if we take all of this into consideration, there could be individual coverage that could continue depending on what their situation was prior to incarceration. So maybe they have a spouse or a family member who would be in charge of handling their affairs while they're gone. Maybe they have a close friend who's checking their mail and would pay their bills until they're released. Others may not have anyone to help them, and that's going to end up in them losing coverage. Medicare Part B coverage requires an individual to apply through the Social Security Administration and charges a monthly premium. Now, if an inmate wants to keep their Part B coverage, they must pay their monthly premium. So again, depending on the situation, this could be handled by a friend, family member, or maybe they set up like a direct bill pay. But of course, if they set up a direct bill pay, there has to be some income coming in to make sure that those premiums are paid for. Failure to make these payments is going to result in the inmate losing Part B coverage. So what happens if a person turns 65 while they're incarcerated? Now, normally, if someone is already getting benefits from Social Security or the Railroad Retirement Board, they are automatically entitled to Medicare Part A and B starting the first day of the month in which they turn 65. If someone is not receiving these benefits, then they're going to receive a reminder in the mail to sign up for Medicare during their initial enrollment period. The initial enrollment period is a time that's 7 months. It's a 7-month period. It begins 3 months before the person turns 65, and it ends 3 months after the month in which they turn 65. Now, individuals who are incarcerated when they turn 65 aren't automatically enrolled because they aren't receiving their Social Security benefits, and they aren't going to receive a reminder by mail. When a person is convicted and sentenced to jail or prison for more than 30 continuous days, the Social Security Administration will suspend a beneficiary's Social Security benefits. In these situations, benefits can be reinstated a month after the month in which a beneficiary is released. Now, if a beneficiary's confinement lasts for 12 consecutive months or longer, then the Social Security Administration is going to terminate their eligibility, and they're going to have to file a new application after they have been released. Incarcerated individuals who didn't enroll or re-enroll can be eligible for a special enrollment period. Now, in order to qualify, beneficiaries must prove that they are eligible for Medicare, show that they did not enroll during the initial enrollment period or general enrollment period because they were incarcerated, and have proof that they were officially released from jail, prison, or other penal institution on or after January 1st of 2023. So you may be asking, what's the significance of January 1st of 2023? That is when this special enrollment period went into effect. The special enrollment period starts the day a person is released, and it ends the last day of the 12th month after release. The late enrollment penalty, which is normally added to the monthly premium, is going to be waived. This change occurs when an individual does not sign up for Medicare coverage when they first become eligible. There are two options for Medicare start dates. They can start coverage the first day of the month after the month in which they signed up, or they can opt for retroactive coverage up to 6 months in the past, as long as it doesn't overlap a time of when they were still incarcerated. So you can see where this could affect services that were provided after their release, but before they enrolled during that special enrollment period. Now, those that qualify will need to contact the Social Security Administration. This can be done by phone or by submitting a completed CMS 0797 form by fax or mail. I have included a link to that form here on this slide. Now, there are special conditions in which Medicare will consider payment for items or services furnished to an individual in custody. Both requirements listed here must be met. First, state or local law enforcement must require individuals to repay the cost of medical items or services that they receive while they are in custody. And second, state or local government bills and seeks collection of payment from all individuals in custody with the same legal status, whether they are insured or uninsured. Additionally, they must pursue collection of those amounts owed in the same manner with the same effort that they would pursue any other debt collection. Now, state or local government may also be required to provide additional information. This would include evidence that they actively pursue collection of debt. This could be documentation of lawsuits or liens against the individual's assets outside of the prison and from non-prison sources. Rules and procedures used to bill and collect amounts from individuals who are in custody should be documented. So this could include regulations, manual instructions, directives, things like that. Again, all of this documentation requirement is on the state or local government. Now, I know there's a lot of criteria that has to be met in order for Medicare to consider payment of services for an incarcerated Benny. When a person becomes incarcerated, the responsibility for health care is transferred to the local, state, or federal system where they are held. The correction facility is responsible for providing healthcare services to their inmates, and Medicare does not interfere with this relationship. Now, should you come across a case where all this criteria is met and Medicare can be billed, there are ways to let us know that the services are for an incarcerated individual. This would include the use of a modifier. So for claims submitted on a UBO 4 or 837I, so we're talking about claims that are going to go through the Fiscal Intermediary Shared System, or FIS. To submit outpatient claims, modifier QJ should be added to all lines with a line item date of service during the incarceration period. Now, for inpatient claims, any dates and charges that overlap the incarceration should be billed as non-covered. If the inpatient claim is billed correctly, you will notice a condition code 63. Now, this is a payer-only code, which means you, the provider, do not add this to your claim. If you try, you're going to receive an error. Condition code 63 is going to allow the claim to process for payment. This indicates that the local, state, and government will pursue collection of debt for the items of services that was provided. Now, in the CMS manual, the example that it gives for an inpatient stay specifically states that the beneficiary is incarcerated for part of the stay. I have never worked in a hospital, so I don't know exactly how a patient can come in and be incarcerated during part of it, but not all of it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That is the instructions that were given specifically for a partially covered stay. Now, if your claim is rejected with FIS reason code U538H and the criteria is met for Medicare to be billed, then you can submit an adjustment that includes the wording that you see here. This should be on the first line of remarks, and you will want to put this in verbatim. Now, for claims that are submitted via CMS 1500 or 837P, so we're talking about the multi-carrier system, or MCS, providers are going to use modifier QJ on items or services received during the incarceration period. Now, denied claims can be appealed if all the criteria mentioned earlier was met, or if it is determined that the beneficiary was not incarcerated at the time services were received. Now, eligibility data is provided by CMS, who relies on the Social Security Administration. So if there's any issues with entitlement dates, the beneficiary will need to contact the Social Security Administration to get the information corrected. We're going to take a look at this in a little bit and see how you guys can see that. Now, I want to go over some resources that I hope you will find helpful. I feel like this has been a topic where there's been a lot of confusion, and I want to provide you with tools that are going to help you to do your job. I want to start out with some CMS resources. I am going to go out and show you these. Give me one moment to get. So the Medicare Learning Network on the CMS website did do this whole fact sheet with patients in custody under a penal authority. They did provide specific links to the Code of Federal Regulations about why Medicare doesn't pay for services. It gives you the definition of who's in custody. They do, with their MLN products, anytime there is an update, they do put those in red, so it kind of calls your attention to something that's new. They also do have a little green box at the beginning of what's changed, so that way you'll kind of know what the most up-to-date information is that's been added. It does give you some information here about checking eligibility and going to the MAC, so I am going to take some time and show you guys where you can find that information. It does talk about Medicare claims processing, but it only talks about denied services. So that's why I wanted to make sure that I told you guys about the claims processing manual where it talks about the modifier and billing inpatient services. Here, it does provide some information about the QJ. It also talks about how does CMS know when individuals are in custody, and that's kind of about how it gets the information from the Social Security Department. It does say here, if there's a problem with their records and it hasn't been updated within 60 days of their release, they are going to have to call that 1-800-MEDICARE and go back to Social Security Administration. The second resource on that slide is this web page, and this I thought was very, very helpful when it comes to the entitlement and things like that. I did want to show you down here. It does go over the different scenarios about what happens for, as well as, like, you know, how long are they incarcerated. And I understand that this can cause a lot of problems for you as providers, because if they actually get their benefits terminated while they're in custody and then they get out and they're like, oh, I still have Medicare, and they don't realize that they have to sign back up, or they're given a year to sign back up, that's a lot of time for them to receive services, where you guys are kind of put in limbo where you don't know what's going on. So I do see where that can cause a lot of extra confusion on your part. But I did want to take you down to the bottom of this, and I apologize for the scrolling here, but I wanted to show you that it also does cover what happens for Medicare Advantage Part C and Medicare prescription drug plans. So it does talk about what happens with those. For the Medicare Part C, there is automatic disenrollment for incarcerated beneficiaries because they are considered to be outside of the service area. So I did also want to call your attention to that. I am going to go back to the slide presentation here. There are some resources also on the CMS website, or I'm sorry, the WPS website. We do have an article related to beneficiaries in custody. I've also included a link to the reason remark code lookup. So if you receive a FIS reason code denial, you're able to look that up and get some additional information. So in the case of reason code U538H, which is for incarcerated beneficiaries, it does give you the wording that needs to be added verbatim in the remarks section when you're submitting an adjustment. A lot of times when they ask you to do these, there is an automation process set up, and so by putting that in remarks, it just allows your claim to get processed a little quicker. Now, HETS is the HIPAA eligibility transaction system, which allows providers to check Medicare beneficiary eligibility in real time. It does involve electronically submitting a 270 file and receiving a 271 response. Now, the HETS system had provided a response with an EB01 of 6, which was followed by an effective date or a span date, and that was when an individual was ineligible for Medicare benefits. Now, on April 5th of this year, HETS made an update to the messaging segment that populates on that 271 response file. So now, in addition to receiving dates, you're going to get a message explaining why the beneficiary isn't eligible, whether that be incarcerated, not lawfully present within the United States, or deported. So I've kind of shown an example here where you're going to get those dates, and then it's going to tell you why. Now, there are times that can overlap. So there may be situations where they were not lawfully present in the United States, but they're also in custody. So there could be some overlapping there, but that all will appear on that same 271 file. Also, with the update to HETS, we also got an update to the WPS Secure Portal. For those of you who may not be familiar, providers can register with WPS to have access to the Secure Portal of the website. And this is commonly used to check Medicare eligibility and claim status. So on the summary tab of the eligibility check, it's now going to contain a header that will be titled Part A or Part B in eligibility. It's going to give you the reason the beneficiary is ineligible, along with the effective date and termination date if applicable. I know this is something that a lot of you wanted, so I personally was a little excited when I heard about this update, and I feel like that's going to make it a lot easier for those of you with portal access to see if a beneficiary is ineligible and why. Now, before I ask Tom if any questions have come through the chat, I want to address the questions that were submitted during the registration process. I received a couple of questions about how to check incarceration dates. Eligibility information can be checked through HETS and the WPS portal. I think ineligibility periods were a little bit difficult to find in the past, but I'm hoping with the updates that would be a little easier for you guys, as shown in those examples. There were quite a few questions about what to do when a beneficiary is saying that they are no longer in custody, but we don't have the information updated. So let me start out by explaining the flow of information. So MACs receive eligibility information from CMS using HETS. CMS receives their information from the Social Security Administration. So this is further complicated depending on how long the Benny was incarcerated. So how we kind of talked about earlier. If they're in custody for less than a year, then their benefits are suspended. So when they get released, they simply contact the Social Security Administration and their benefits can be reinstated the next month. Now, if they're incarcerated for 12 consecutive months or longer, then Social Security terminates their eligibility and they have to file a new application once they're released. This is going to include providing a copy of the release documents before Social Security can process the request. Now, if the patient becomes eligible for Medicare while in custody, then they're going to have to enroll during that special enrollment period, which starts the day a person is released and ends the last day of the 12-month period after release. So as we kind of talked about, all this time can just complicate things for you guys and trying to get your claims processed. And it could also be confusing for the beneficiaries because I don't know that all this is explained to them at the time of their release. Now, if the beneficiary has taken all of the correct steps to get enrolled or to get their benefits reinstated, and the system hasn't been updated within 60 days, the patient is going to need to contact 1-800-MEDICARE to find out what the issue may be. The Incarcerated Medicare beneficiary website is the one that provides all that information. I can show you directly. Here's where it talks about the special enrollment period and when they can go through it. I think this one is for the Medicare Advantage, but if we scroll up here, it does give some information here. And this does, like I said, it does kind of complicate things for you guys because they get to choose their start date. So they can go back 6 months. So there could be services received during that time that Medicare denied. And now they end up getting eligibility. So I do understand that's some extra work for you guys. Now, a couple of you asked if you could bill the beneficiary. Now, if the beneficiary is actually incarcerated, then the facility holding them is responsible for their medical treatment. So payment would need to come from the correction facility or government entity. It is a service that is not covered by Medicare per the, or I'm sorry, if it is a service that is not covered by Medicare per the Social Security Act, then you can bill the patient following any state or local guidelines. I also did want to mention that FIS reason code that we talked about before, that does reject the claim as patient liable. So you would be able to bill the beneficiary. Another question I got was, do we have to get a denial before we bill the jail or agency? I'm hoping that you haven't had any issues with this in the past. But in general, once a person is incarcerated, it is the responsibility of the county or the state to provide medical care. The Supreme Court ruled in 1976 that inmates have a constitutional right to adequate medical care. And this means that prisons and jails are required to provide provide necessary medical and mental health care. So you shouldn't have to bill Medicare and get a denial. They should be paying for those services, and they should know that they are responsible for that. Is there an option to still bill Medicare if the patient was confirmed not incarcerated at the time of service, but has not or will not update their information with the Social Security Administration? Or if we do not have a valid contact information for the patient to notify them. If Medicare is rejecting your claim stating that the patient is incarcerated, again, that rejection is deemed patient liable, so the patient can be billed. Now, you did mention not having a valid contact information to notify them. So another option would be to follow your facility's policy for collecting unpaid debt. I'm not sure what lengths you'd have to go through for that, but I'm sure there has to be something on file with hospitals and doctors' offices. I'm sure that happens. Now that was all that I had for the pre-submitted questions. So I am going to ask Tom if there's any questions that have come through in the chat.
Hey, Karen, we do have a couple of questions. First one, if a prisoner is transported by the prison to a medical facility for treatment, is that a furlough?
The definition that I have for a medical furlough would include that, yes.
Be careful with that one because the transport, if done by an ambulance, can be considered a furlough in some cases and not in others. So the furlough itself, it may be because it's a medically necessary transport, it's considered a medical situation and therefore falls under the medical criteria Karen talked about. So I'm a little bit of an ambulance expert on that one, so I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that the ambulance regulations still fall under the medical necessity portion, and that's why they could not necessarily be considering a furlough. Now, on the other hand, if it's a not medically necessary transport and they're being transported for something, then yes, that is a furlough. So I know Karen probably wouldn't be able to explain that quite fully. So hopefully that makes sense. We do have a couple of other questions. First, just to let everyone know that the links were listed in the chat. A couple people asked if I could put the links in the chat, did that for you. So the next question is, does Medicare ever pay any services while the patient is incarcerated? If so, are we adding the QJ modifier?
That would fall, I'm going to go to, here is the section of the manual where it talks about claims processing. So here you're going to see it has ABMAC and then in parentheses it has an A. So this is going to pertain to claims that fall within FIS. So the UB04 837I. This does say, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure what type of provider you are, so I'm going to go over both. For outpatient claims, you're going to append HIC PIC modifier QJ to all lines. It does not tell you that you have to bill those services as non-covered. So you're just going to bill the claim and you're going to put that QJ modifier on there. If we go down here to the AB MAC, and then it has a parentheses of a B. So here we're talking about the CMS 1500 or 837P. And we'll see that it has the same thing here. You're going to use the QJ modifier. I can't tell you yes or no that those services are going to be paid. All I can tell you is that you'll have to bill it with that QJ modifier and we'll consider payment.
All right, next question. What if a beneficiary is on work release? Who's responsible for the payment then?
That would be something that I would need to take back with me. I didn't see any specifics about work release, so I would like to do some further some further gathering of information on that before I answer that. I will send that out to everybody in the group when I find an answer for that one.
All right, last question. Is there anywhere on the common working file or portal that shows where the patient is incarcerated at or what county? We have issues finding who we need to bill when they get incarcerated rejections.
I can see that could be an issue. This is what I have as what is going to show in the portal. So there really isn't a spot that's going to list a provider, or I'm sorry, to list the facility that they are at. I can double check with our portal team and see if maybe they can provide me with some more information, because they would have done the testing for this update. So I can check into that and I can get back to everybody and let everyone know. I can understand that would be difficult, especially if you have a lot of facilities in your county or city.
Hey, Karen, I did look at the files for 270, 271 transaction, and we don't get that information. So I'm wondering if it's just something that's not available to us.
That could be, if it's not on HETS. I don't know of any way that the portal would be able to get that information. Thank you for looking that up, Tom.
You are welcome, and that was our last question.
Okay, thank you. After the close of today's webinar, you are going to receive a thank you for attending email. Here is where you are going to find your certificate of achievement and contact hours for continuing education units. This email also contains a link which will give you another opportunity to provide feedback. If you don't get this email, please check your spam or your junk folder. You will also need to add messenger@webex.com to your safe sender list, and that's going to help you avoid any issues in the future. If you joined by phone only, you will not receive this email. So please send an email to the education mailbox and include your name and phone number that you used to join, and that way we can email a certificate to you. Now, if you think of any questions after the webinar, you do have 7 days to send those in. You can email those to the education mailbox shown here on the screen. Be sure to put today's topic in the subject line so that staff know that your question is related to this webinar, and they will send it directly to me. Now, remember, if it is a claim-specific question, please send those to customer service. I don't have system access, so I can't look up and see what happened with your claim in order to explain why you got a denial or why things are showing incorrectly. Now, when you disconnect from the webinar, you will be redirected to a CMS survey. I'm also having Tom add a link in the chat. And your feedback really does mean a lot to us. We review what you have to say. We do our best to make the changes that you ask for. And this is also an opportunity for you to let us know what topics you want to see. So if there's something that you'd really like us to provide education on, please be specific and add that in there. Also, if you have ideas that you think would improve how you receive your education, be sure to tell us those too. We're really open to suggestions. Now the redirect is going to look like what you see here in the bottom middle. We do not have control over how this appears, so we just want you to know that it's not spam, it's nothing malicious. You can simply click continue and then it will open the survey. That brings us to the end of today's presentation. On behalf of myself, Tom, and the Provider Outreach and Education team, I'd like to thank you for being here today, and I hope that you will join us for future events. You may now disconnect.